We'll start today's proceedings, and as usual, we'll start with the daily routine. Presenting and reading petitions. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. Government notices of motion. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice of the future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Government of Nova Scotia is responsible to provide employees with a safe and respectful workplace, and whereas employees who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or intersex may confront significant challenges in their daily lives, including their work lives. And whereas several public servants have established an LGBTI network for public servants to provide support to each other, share their experience, and raise awareness of the LGBTI issues in the workplace. Therefore, be resolved, the House Assembly congratulate the members of the LGBTI network and the network's contribution to a creative, rewarding, and productive public service. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Northern Lights Lantern Festival is a celebration of the vibrancy and diversity of Halifax's North End, which takes place each summer in Merv Sullivan Park, often referred to as the Pit. And whereas many local individuals and organizations work together each year to make the festival a reality, and whereas the 6th annual Northern Lights Lantern Festival was held on Saturday, August 6, 2009, with a record turnout of happy neighbors and visitors, therefore be it resolved that the members of the Nova Scotia Legislature express their appreciation for the ongoing efforts of the organizers of the Northern Lights Lantern Festival and congratulate the North End community on a happy and successful 6th annual festival. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be reading this on behalf of the Premier. Okay. I hereby give notice on the future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Order of Nova Scotia is the highest honour the province can bestow on its citizens, and whereas Michael Gilbert Baker of Lunenburg, Melvin James Boutlier of Halifax, the late Muriel Helena Duckworth of Bedford, Philip Reitman of Bedford, and Viola Marie Robinson of Truro were invested into the Order of Nova Scotia today for significant contributions to their communities and the province. And whereas a former member of this House, Michael Baker, was among those recognized with this honour for his unwavering commitment and dedication to the province of Nova Scotia. Therefore, be it resolved that this House recognize the recipients of the 2009 Order of Nova Scotia and thank them and their families for the positive work they have done for our province. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. I'm going to recognize the Honourable Minister of Health on an introduction.
Thanks. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to draw attention of all of the members of the gallery to a young lady who's joined us today in the East Gallery, coming here from North End, Halifax to observe the proceedings of the legislature, and she's here with her dad, Matt Hebb. So I'd ask Madeline and Matt to rise and receive the warm welcome of the legislature.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Shelburne County Special Olympian Anna Crates was a silver medalist at the Nova Scotia Summer Games in Halifax on July 17th through to the 19th, 2009. And whereas Anna Crates excelled in the sports of bowling to win the silver medal, and whereas Anna Crates consistently showed great sportsmanship, dedication, and effort as a Special Olympian, therefore be it resolved that the House of Assembly congratulate Special Olympian Anna Crates for bringing home a silver medal from the Nova Scotia Summer Games in Halifax on July 17th to 19th, 2009. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm introducing this resolution on behalf of my colleague, the Minister of Labour and Workforce Development. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas fire services are an essential part of the safety of any community, whereas the brave men and women in our fire services protect families and property across our province, and whereas these individuals often do so at great personal risk, often on a volunteer basis. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Nova Scotia Legislature recognize the efforts and dedication of these individuals by celebrating Saturday, October the 10th, Fire Service Recognition Day in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, may I do an introduction before this resolution?
Certainly.
We have in here this morning, this afternoon, Mr. Dal Atwood and his family up in the East Wing up here. If I could get them to stand to say hello. Mr. Atwood is a senior Crown attorney with the Nova Scotia Public Prosecution Services, and as a member will hear in my resolution, I would like to congratulate Mr. Atwood on being selected as a Fellow of the American Bar Foundation.
Very good.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Dal Atwood, Nova Scotia Public Prosecution Services Senior Crown Attorney, has been selected as a Fellow of the American Bar Foundation, and whereas being a Fellow of the American Bar Foundation is recognition of a lawyer whose professional, public, and private career has demonstrated outstanding dedication to the welfare of the community, the traditions of the profession, and the maintenance and advancement of the objectives of the American Bar Association. And whereas Mr. Atwood was selected by his peers to be one of only 4 other fellows in Canada, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Dal Atwood on his well-deserved honour and demonstrate the great pride this recognition as Fellow of the American Bar Foundation brings to our province. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the town of Middleton, the heart of the valley, is celebrating its centennial in 2009, and whereas Town Council staff and volunteers have worked hard all year to offer fun and inexpensive activities for citizens of all ages, and whereas these activities included the official opening of Centennial Park, which houses the town's new pergola, a concert and activity space that will be enjoyed for generations to come. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly congratulate the Mayor, Council, staff and volunteers in the town of Middleton for making its centennial year one to remember. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Shelburne County Special Olympian Andrew Hicks was a silver medalist at the Nova Scotia Summer Games in Halifax on July 17th to the 19th, 2009. And whereas Andrew Hicks won the silver medal for his performance in shot put competition. And whereas Andrew Hicks consistently shows great sportsmanship, dedication and effort as a Special Olympic, therefore be resolved that the House of Assembly congratulate Shelburne County Special Olympian Andrew Hicks for being a silver medalist at the Nova Scotia Summer Games in Halifax on July 17th to 19th, 2009. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. I might ask ministers, I guess, when they have a resolution, that if it is a ministerial notice of motion, there is a difference between that and a regular notice of motion. So I just ask you to please consider if it's a ministerial notice of motion or otherwise. It's really, it should be done, a motion like the last one should be done under a regular notice of motion. Thank you. Any further government notices of motion? Introduction of bills. The Honourable Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I beg leave to introduce a bill, an act to ban uranium mining in West Hants.
The honourable member for Hants West begs leave to introduce a bill and an act to ban uranium mining in West Hants.
Bill 31, entitled An Act to Ban Uranium Mining in West Hants.
Order this bill be read a second time on a future day. The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1995-96, the Education Act.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove begs leave to introduce a bill, an act to amend Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1995-96, the Education Act.
Bill 32, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1995-96, the Education Act.
Order this bill be read a second time on a future day. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 376 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Service Act.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West begs leave to introduce a bill, an act to amend Chapter 376 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Service Act.
Bill 33, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 376 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Service Act.
Order this bill be read a second time on a future day. Any further bills? Notices of motion. The honourable member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future date. I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Honourable Michael G. Baker, QC, ECNS, former MLA for Lunenburg and Cabinet Minister, served the province of Nova Scotia with dignity and distinction, devoting much of his life to his constituents with the love and support of his family. Whereas our former friend, colleague, and legislator was honoured posthumously with the Order of Nova Scotia, received by his dedicated and devoted wife, Cindy Baker. Whereas the Order of Nova Scotia is the highest honour the province of Nova Scotia can bestow on its citizens, therefore be resolved this House recognize the contribution of the Honourable Michael Gilbert Baker, QC, ECNS, and convey our warmest and best wishes to his wife Cindy, his sons Matthew and Daniel, his family, community of Lunenburg, and all those who have supported him greatly. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and pass without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the newly opened Beacon House is located on the grounds of the Valley Regional Hospital in Kentville and operated by Mental Health and Addiction Services of Annapolis Valley Health. And whereas Beacon House provides psychosocial rehabilitation services to individuals between the ages of 18 and 30 who live in communities throughout Nova Scotia who have been diagnosed with a mental illness. And whereas the vision of Beacon House is to help its clients become full citizens by identifying personal goals, by rebuilding connections with home communities, and through the delivery of a comprehensive range of professional services during an intensive 6-month residential skill development program. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the staff and management of Beacon House on the opening of its new facility in Kentville and commend them for continuing their important work of serving those Nova Scotians and their families who live with a mental illness. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm reading this on behalf of our leader. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia's economy and industries based in this province are depending on a resourceful trades program, and whereas the Premier and his Minister of Education are seemingly oblivious to the fairness of the collective bargaining process, as they are refusing to provide the same wage level to more than 900 community college instructors as they have already given to the Nova Scotia public school teachers, and whereas the community college teachers are able to walk off the job at any time, which in turn could lead to possible delays in the opening of nursing home bids, while leaving parents scrambling for child care due to the delay in child care workers obtaining the necessary course certification. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly immediately call upon the Premier and his Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development to immediately seek a resumption in talks with the community college faculty across Nova Scotia to avoid labour shortages in places such as nursing home and daycare across Nova Scotia in the coming months. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Alfred Fitzpatrick was born in Pictou County, attended Pictou Academy, and founded Frontier College in 1899 to combat illiteracy in Canada. Whereas Alfred Fitzpatrick, a Presbyterian minister, saw the need to help immigrant workers in the Canadian Shield, not with charity, but with social justice through education and enlightenment. And whereas Frontier College supports literacy programs in lumber camps, Aboriginal communities, prisons, and downtown streets across much of Canada. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly recognize the 110th anniversary of the founding of Frontier College and the contribution made to literacy and education by Alfred Fitzpatrick, a great Pictonian and a great Nova Scotian. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Lunenburg campus of the NSCC in Bridgewater is home to 450 full-time and 400 part-time students, which has a focus on student involvement and learning through community contributions, and whereas these nearly 1,000 students in Bridgewater will see their class time suspended on an indefinite basis if the community college teachers are forced to walk off the job due to the NDP government's failure to address fairness in their contract negotiations, and whereas the member for Lunenburg West is a former faculty member at the Bridgewater campus and knows a large contingent of the present faculty should be encouraging the Premier and the Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development to make a fair and reasonable offer to teachers to avoid a province-wide shutdown. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly immediately call upon the Premier and his Minister of Education to immediately seek a resumption in talks with community college faculty across Nova Scotia, so nearly 1,000 students attending Lunenburg campus of the NSCC will see no interruption in their classes as they pursue a working career. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate. There
has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? No. I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 18 young Nova Scotians pursuing energy-related studies at a university or a Nova Scotia community college have received scholarships, and whereas the scholarship supports ongoing technical research related to petroleum projects from an economic and financial perspective, and whereas the criteria for recipients are academic achievement, involvement in extracurricular activities, show potential, and have demonstrated a clear interest in the Nova Scotia energy sector. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly recognize and congratulate Lucas Boyle of Caledonia, Queens County, and Mandy McConnell of Liverpool, Queens County, for having each earned one of these scholarships, and I wish them well in their future endeavours. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Strait NSCC campus is home to extensive trades and technology which are much needed in today's economy, and whereas the 700 full-time and 300 part-time students of the Strait area campus have sacrificed greatly in order to improve their education, often financially as well as personally, and whereas a strike at the Strait area campus would have major negative implications for the staff, students at school, as well as the NDP candidate for Inverness. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly immediately call upon the Premier and his Minister to seek a resumption in talks with community college faculty across Nova Scotia so the 1,000 students at the Strait area campus will not have their studies disrupted. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Truro Bible Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Heather Bishop Taylor and Daryl Taylor of Truro are the company of puppeteers producing the maritime marionettes shows that have delighted audiences across Canada and internationally, and whereas the Taylors' many skills see traditional and original stories brought to life with exquisite, handmade, skillfully manipulated marionettes, and whereas the Maritime Marionettes are enjoying their 23rd season since their founding in 1986 and have recently returned from a successful series of shows in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates Heather Bishop Taylor and Daryl Taylor on their national and their international successes with their company, the Maritime Marionettes. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Cumberland campus of the Nova Scotia Community College in Spring Hill and Amherst provides opportunities for many in Cumberland County to further their education and fill positions vital to our economy. And whereas presently there are 350 full-time students and 150 part-time students attending the Cumberland campus who will be severely impacted if a contract agreement is not worked out between the province and faculty. And whereas the effects of a strike would not only be disastrous to the students, but as well to those sectors of the economy who depend on the services their students will provide. Therefore, be resolved all members of this House immediately call upon the Premier and his Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development to immediately seek a resumption in talks with community college faculty across Nova Scotia so the 500 Nova Scotia Community College students in Cumberland County will not see an interruption in their studies. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and pass without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member from Hants West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the King's Tech campus of the Nova Scotia Community College system in Kemptville is home to 1,000 full-time and 850 part-time students who enjoy a bright, modern learning environment. And whereas these nearly 2,000 students will be left on their own in their pursuit of a career in community college, teachers are forced to walk off the job due to the NDP government's abysmal failure to address fairness in the contract negotiations. And whereas the NDP government is singling out teachers at King's Tech in Kemptville by refusing to provide them with the same wage settlement already given to the Nova Scotia public school teachers. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly immediately call upon the Premier and his Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development to immediately seek a resumption in talks with community college faculty across Nova Scotia so nearly 2,000 students attending the King's Tech campus of Nova Scotia Community College System in Kemptville will see no interruption in their educational classes as they pursue a working career. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day to move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the NSCC Truro campus is a true success story, as its continued growth, as well as the education and opportunity provides so many immeasurable benefits to the community. And whereas the 800 full-time and 550 part-time students are actively trying to better educate and prepare themselves to enter vital sectors of our economy. And whereas a work stoppage will provide untold hardship to the students who sacrifice so much in order to pursue their goals. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly immediately call upon the Premier and his Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development to immediately seek a resumption in talks with community college faculty across Nova Scotia so that the over 1,300 students at the NSCC Truro campus will not see an interruption in their studies. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. There seems to be a theme to our resolutions here today. I'll recognize the honourable member for our Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Lake Charlotte Area Heritage Society was founded in 1995 by the community members from the communities within the Loop, Lake Charlotte, Ship Harbour, DeBay's Cove, Owl's Head, Little Harbour, Clam Bay, as well as Upper Lakeville and Oyster-upon-Jador. And whereas the Society recognized the need for preserving the heritage of these communities and its creation was spurred on the imminent loss of the significant heritage buildings in the area such as Hoskins General Store. And whereas the Society owns and operates Memory Lane Village, a living history museum displaying rural Nova Scotia life in the 1940s. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature Assembly acknowledge the community and the volunteers of Lake Charlotte Area Heritage Society on their dedication and hard work in maintaining the Memory Lane Heritage Village. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Akeley campus of the Nova Scotia Community College System in Dartmouth is home to 3,500 students, 1,000 of them full-time, and is well known for its state-of-the-art transportation centre and its broadcasting and television curriculum programs, and whereas the Premier and his Minister of Education are seemingly oblivious to the fairness in the collective bargaining process, as they are refusing to provide the same level of wage to more than 900 community college instructors as they have already given to Nova Scotia's public school teachers, and whereas the community college teachers at the Akeley campus are able to walk off the job at any time, which in turn could lead to a potential labour shortages, with so many students being impacted by a labour dispute simply because the NDP government fails to recognize something called wage fairness in collective bargaining negotiations. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly immediately call upon the Premier and his Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development to immediately seek a resumption in talks with community college faculty across Nova Scotia to avoid a crippling strike while placing community college students in a state of limbo for an indefinite period of time. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Lunenburg West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. whereas the Parkview Panthers basketball team has a proud athletic record in high school sport, and whereas the 14-member Parkview Panther team, their 3 coaches, and parental guides will be touring Europe November 6th to 21st, 2009, and whereas this athletic and educational tour will take them to Germany, Switzerland, Italy, and Slovenia. Therefore, be it resolved that this House wishes the Panthers basketball team, good luck and Godspeed on this very exciting athletic and educational excursion. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be reading this resolution on behalf of the honourable member for Colchester North. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future date I should move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Nova Scotia Community College Pictou campus in Stellarton is a vital part of the town as well as Pictou County because of learning and economic spin-off it provides. And whereas the 825 full-time and 1,000 part-time students are learning skills which will serve them well in an economy and increasingly relies on skilled workers. And whereas a strike at the Nova Scotia Community College Pictou campus would not only hurt the students but the broader community which depends on all the spin-offs the institution provides. Therefore, it be resolved all members of this House of Assembly immediately call upon the Premier and his Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development to immediately seek a resumption of the talks with community college faculty across Nova Scotia so that the roughly 1,800 students at Nova Scotia Community College Pictou campus can continue their studies. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Community Services on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce to everyone in our gallery a very dear friend of mine, a special individual, Mr. Rudy Hawsey, who most of you will know as a wonderful gentleman who has been a mentor to many in the environmental movement and has supported the environmental movement and Heritage Trust. And I also like to mention that many, many years ago, I actually went to a little school that Mr. Hawsey and his wife had, was called the Country Day School. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Rudy Hawsey.
We welcome him and all our guests here with us today. The Honourable Member for Cumberland North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the town of Amherst has recently become a host community for the Canada World Youth Program, welcoming 9 Canadians and 9 Indonesians to the area at a ceremony held October 1st. And whereas these 18 young adults aged 17 to 21 will be exposed to Cumberland County and the rest of the province during their 2-month stay, partaking in unique learning experiences that will benefit both themselves and the people of Amherst. And whereas the participants will receive education and training in an intellectual context which will promote equality and prepare them to work effectively in an ever-growing international marketplace. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly extend our warmest wishes to these 18 visitors of Amherst and wish them good luck in their time spent in our province and their travels abroad. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Hants West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Annapolis Valley campus of the Nova Scotia Community College system operates from 2 main sites, one in Middleton along with the Centre of Geographic Sciences in Lawrencetown, Annapolis County, as well as the Community Learning Centre in Digby. And whereas presently there are 400 full-time and 400 part-time students attending the Annapolis Valley campus of the Nova Scotia Community College in Annapolis and Digby counties, who will see their course instruction and ability to attend classes rudely interrupted in the event of a walkout by community college faculty. And whereas the NDP government is singling out Nova Scotia Community College teachers at the Annapolis Valley campus by refusing to provide them with the same wage settlement already given to Nova Scotia's public school teachers. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly immediately call upon the Premier and his Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development to immediately seek a resumption in the talks with the community college faculty across Nova Scotia so 800 students attending the Annapolis Valley campus of the Nova Scotia Community College system in Middleton, Lawrencetown and Digby will see no interruption in their educational pursuits. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. I'm going to recognize the honourable member from Pictou East on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to make an introduction in the East Gallery. We have Fraser Hunter, who is a former president of the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture. His farm straddles Antigonish and Pictou counties. He is involved with many enterprises, including Tony's Meats and Antigonish, and I would like the House to extend a very warm welcome to him.
The honourable member for Hammonds Plains, Upper Sackville.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas from August 15th to 29th, 2009, Heidi Miller participated in the 2009 Canada Games on Prince Edward Island, and whereas Heidi Miller participated as an important member of the Nova Scotia Canada Games team as a swimming coach, and whereas Heidi Miller participated in this once-in-a-lifetime sports and culture event, which was attended by more than 20,000 people. Therefore, be it resolved that Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate Heidi Miller on her participation at the Canada Games 2009 and wish her well in her future endeavours. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
And on a future date, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Institute of Technology campus of the Nova Scotia Community College system situated in Halifax North End is home to 1,000 full-time and 4,300 part-time students who enjoy a bright, modern learning environment, and whereas these nearly 5,500 students will be left on their own in the pursuit of a career if community college teachers are forced to walk off the job due to the NDP government's abysmal failure to address fairness in their contract negotiations. And whereas the NDP government is singling out teachers in the Institute of Technology campus in Halifax North End by refusing to provide them with the same wage settlement already given to Nova Scotia's public school teachers. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly immediately call upon the Premier and the Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development to immediately seek a resumption in talks with community college faculty access across Nova Scotia so nearly 5,500 students attending the Institute of Technology campus of the Nova Scotia Community College system in Halifax will see no interruption in their educational classes as they pursue a working career. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Fundy View Community Centre provides a focal point for social life in Halls Harbour, and whereas the Community Centre is a welcoming venue for concerts and public meetings, and whereas the survival of the Community Centre depends upon the investment of countless volunteer hours, therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulate the Halls Harbour Community Club for its untiring commitment to making the Fundy View Community Centre a gathering place for the citizens of Halls Harbour. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Burridge campus of the Nova Scotia Community College in Yarmouth is widely recognized for its customized training programs and for their outstanding work within the local business community, And whereas presently there are 500 full-time and 450 part-time students attending the Burridge campus of the Nova Scotia Community College in Yarmouth who will be severely impacted in the event of a walkout by the community college faculty. And whereas the NDP government is singling out the Nova Scotia Community College teachers by refusing to provide them with the same wage settlement already given to the Nova Scotia public school teachers. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly immediately call upon the Premier and the Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development to immediately seek a resumption in the talks of the community college faculty across Nova Scotia. So 950 attending the Burridge campus of the community college system in Yarmouth will see no interruption of their educational pursuits. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver, and I know it will go through.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Guysborough, Sheet Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 2009 is the 10th anniversary of the incorporation of the Eastern Communities Youth Association, a group who serve the youth of Eastern Guysborough County, and whereas on September 22nd, the Eastern Communities Youth Association Youth Council received an award at the Celebrating Communities Conference for Excellence in Youth Leadership, and whereas the Eastern Counties Youth Association is dedicated to providing positive alternatives for the youth of Eastern Guysborough County through the operation of a drop-in youth centre and through providing educational and recreational programming. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the board, staff, youth and volunteers of the Eastern Communities Youth Association on their 10th anniversary, and also congratulate the Youth Council on their recent award with best wishes for future successes. Waiver and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Marconi campus of the NSCC in Sydney is a true centre in the community where vital learning takes place and where the community leaders of tomorrow carefully hone and develop their skills. And whereas the 1,100 full-time students and 1,300 part-time students represent an important portion of the future skilled workforce needed to continue and build and strengthen our economy. And whereas a strike would seriously jeopardize this much-needed training and development as well will cause serious personal and financial hardship for those affected by it, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly immediately call upon the Premier and the Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development to immediately seek a resumption in talks with community college faculty across Nova Scotia so that the 2,400 students at the Marconi campus can continue their studies. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. The honourable member for Sable Island, Halifax Citadel.
In that order. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Adam Sarty recently received the Science Champion Award from the Discovery Centre, and whereas Mr. Sarty, astronomy and physics professor at St. Mary's University, was awarded the prize for the second year in a row, and whereas Mr. Sarty continues to make the sciences more accessible to children by hosting captivating in-class presentations that teach the wonder of electromagnetism and nuclear physics, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House offer our sincere congratulations to Adam Sarty for putting the sciences of the stars within arm's reach of the province's youngest learners. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Victoria of the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the NSCC Waterfront Campus is a leader in environmentally friendly practices as it uses 50% less energy than comparable buildings, and whereas the 1,800 full-time and 2,500 part-time students learn firsthand the skills of tomorrow, and their knowledge and innovative spirit will serve the people as well as the economy of Nova Scotia well long into the future, and whereas a strike at the Waterfront Campus will put on hold the studies and skill development of so many which our province will one day have to depend on for its future success. Therefore be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly immediately call upon the Premier and as Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development to seek a resumption in talks with the community college faculty across Nova Scotia so the 4,300 students in the Nova Scotia Community College Waterfront Campus will not see a disruption in their studies. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Bob Christie, a former chemical plant operator in Pictou County, observed developments in the early 1970s which gave him great concern in relation to the environmental protection of Pictou Harbour and surrounding areas. And whereas Mr. Christie became a grassroots environmentalist who has consistently challenged business, industry, and government through the gathering of concrete data related to Pictou Harbour, its rivers and estuaries. And whereas Bob Christie helped form the Pictou Harbour Environmental Action Plan and Protection Project in 1992 under the Atlantic Coastal Action Program to monitor the health of Pictou Harbour and surrounding areas with strong support from municipal leaders. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly congratulate Bob Christie, a lifelong resident of Pictou County, for 35 years of work toward a cleaner and healthier environment in Pictou County. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'll try one more time. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Shelburne campus of the Nova Scotia Community College is home to 100 full-time and 250 part-time students where everyone knows each other's name. And where these 350 students in Shelburne will see their class time suspended on an indefinite basis if the community college teachers are forced to walk off the job due to the NDP government's established failure to address fairness in their contract negotiations. And whereas the NDP government is singling out teachers at the Shelburne campus by refusing to provide them with the same wage settlement already given to the Nova Scotia's public school teachers. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this Assembly immediately call upon the Premier and his Minister of Education, Labour and Workforce Development to immediately seek a resumption in talks with community college faculty so that nearly 350 students attending the Shelburne campus will see no interruption in their educational classes as they pursue a working career. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 100 years ago, the first Nova Scotia Guides Association sports meet was held, and whereas the milestone was celebrated recently at the association's headquarters in the community of Hibernia in Queens. Whereas the celebrations showcase the skills of guiders, which included chainsaw carving, Swede saw, and cross-cut saw competition, canoe rescue, double canoe competition, the standing chop competition, to name just a few. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly recognize the Nova Scotia Guides Association and congratulate them on their celebration of 100 years of guiding in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas cancer is a scourge that takes young and old alike without pity, and whereas the Winners Walk of Hope has raised over $4.5 million for ovarian cancer in Canada, and whereas on September 12, 2009, the Walk of Hope was held in Enfield, continuing the fight against cancer. Therefore, be resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate the organisers and volunteers of the Winners Walk of Hope in Enfield and wish them well on their fight against ovarian cancer. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver, notice, and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Truro Bible Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Truro Tennis Club is a community organization open to anyone who wants to play tennis and is presently coming to an end of another very successful season, and whereas the club held its annual awards picnic day on September 20th, 2009, and whereas the Truro Tennis Club presented a special appreciation award to longtime members Romaine Piers and Jack Piers in recognition of their many years of service as tournament coordinators, therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates Romaine Piers and Jack Piers for the appreciation award that they justifiably received from the Truro Tennis Club on September 20th, 2009. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Lunenburg West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Bridgewater United Church has been serving the spiritual and community needs of residents of Bridgewater and the surrounding area for over 100 years, and whereas Bridgewater United Church has been actively involved in making Bridgewater and the surrounding area a stronger community by hosting daycare, scouting, and other important programs, as well as being a major contributor to the local food bank, and whereas Bridgewater United Church celebrated its 161st anniversary on Sunday, September 27, 2009, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate Reverend Ivan Morton, Ms. Judy Norton, and the congregation of Bridgewater United for 161 years of dedicated service to the community of Bridgewater and the surrounding area. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Cumberland North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Polycello has succeeded in researching, developing, and producing the latest in environmentally friendly packaging called Smart Pack, all from its head office and plant based in Amherst, Nova Scotia. And whereas this family-owned company was one of the first North American plastic or flexible packaging businesses to earn the ISO 14001 designation for high environment management standards. And whereas Polycello is one of North America's leading innovators in producing sustainable products that are both cost-effective and better for the environment. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly extend its congratulations to Polycello of Amherst and thank this company and its employees for the contributions to environmental sustainability. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Guys-Bouchette Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Cyril and Lillian Rose have been active and respected residents of the town of Mulgrave since 1962, and whereas Captain Cyril Rose has been a dedicated member of Temple Lodge number 57 for 46 years, and whereas Lillian Rose has been a faithful member of St. Andrew's Anglican Church Women's Group since 1962, therefore be it resolved that the Legislature of Nova Scotia recognize and thank Cyril and Lillian Rose for their many years of volunteer service in their community and its organizations, and wish them much health and happiness upon their relocation. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Citadel Sable Island.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas St. Mary's University student Leah Scarry is a leader and entrepreneur, and whereas Ms. Scarry benefited from the Students in Business Startup Loan Program to develop, market, and run EQ Media, and whereas through the support and mentorship of the Students in Business program, she now runs a successful enterprise, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Leah Scarry for being a successful and forward-thinking entrepreneur whose leadership sets a shining example for all Nova Scotia University students. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. No further notices of motion. Orders of the day. Oral questions put by members. The time now is 2:38. We'll go to 4:08. And I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. Yesterday, the Premier told reporters that he knew the Minister of Fisheries was selling his fishing gear and lobster license. He also said he knew the Minister of Fisheries approached the Office of the Conflict of Interest Commissioner for advice. So my question for the Premier is, when did you know the potential buyer of your minister's gear and license was getting money from the Fisheries Loan Board?
The Honourable the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't think I would ever know whether or not the buyer was going to get money from the loan board. Of course, the buyer is an independent person. They make an application. They make an application to the board. If they meet the appropriate criteria, if they make the application and they meet the criteria, they get a loan.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is a code of conduct for Cabinet Ministers and the Office of Conflict of Interest Commissioner for a reason. The Minister of Fisheries knew when he wrote the Office of the Conflict of Interest Commissioner on June 22nd that the potential buyer of his gear and license had made an application for a loan to the Fisheries Loan Board. So my question to the Premier is, when did he tell you, before or after you made him Minister of Fisheries?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you. The Minister disclosed it to me, I believe, in one of the very earliest conversations I had with him about his potential appointment to Cabinet, and he did exactly the right thing. He did exactly what the Code of Commissioners, or the Code of Conflict is there for. He did exactly what the Commissioner is there for. He inquired as to the appropriateness of what he should do. He got advice. He followed it.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this summer, the Minister of Justice found himself in a difficult spot. In that case, the Premier removed the responsibilities for the Police Review Board from the Minister and gave it to the Minister of Finance until this matter was resolved. So my question for the Premier, why didn't you remove the responsibilities for the Fisheries Loan Board from your Fisheries Minister when you knew there was a potential conflict of interest here?
The Honourable the Premier.
As I pointed out in the answer to the last question, Mr. Speaker, the Minister wrote to the Commissioner of Conflict of Interest. He asked for advice with respect to the matter. He received advice. He had followed the procedure. Mr. Speaker, that's what the Commissioner is there for. They're there to give advice and direction.
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister responsible for Lobster Gate. Yes. As you're probably aware, there are many discussions in our area in regards to independent fishermen and the issue of trust agreements used to help operators get into the industry. There are still many trust agreements out there where boats and licenses are run by the fishermen on behalf of other individuals or companies. My question to the current Minister of Fisheries is, what is your position on the current federal owner-operator policy?
Good question.
I'd remind members to address their questions to the proper minister with the proper name of the department. I'll recognize the Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and the member opposite. This has been very important to all members of the particular House, and the owner-operator policy has been supported by this particular party, and I think all parties across Nova Scotia. It's an ongoing process, and the federal government is dealing with that, and I, as an individual, as a Minister of Fisheries, support the owner-operator policy. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Argyll on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the Minister responsible for the Minister of Fisheries and Environment, should understand the importance of trust agreements, Mr. Speaker, especially before our government brought in the new Loan for License program that he is now responsible for, that many entrants who could not get bank backing to get into the industry, since licenses were very high, record high prices, well over $500,000, that they needed this backing in order to have it happen. There are still many trust agreements out there today, and there are fishermen asking when they should get rid of them, because the owner-operator policy is very explicit that within the 7-year process that they are to get rid of the trust agreements. Do you have, or have you ever had, a trust agreement and designated another fisherman to run your fishing enterprise?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell the member opposite I've never had a trust agreement. I have followed DFO policies to the letter, and I understand by the federal policy regarding trust agreements, there is a 7-year window that the industry must dispose or must take corrective measures to deal with this. This is a federal policy, and I can assure the member opposite that I have been 38 years fishing, and I understand the policies very well, and I respect them. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Minister or Member for Argyll on your final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Very interesting. And I'll table a copy of a Fisheries Oceans document that designates another fisherman to run your boat, the disconnection. So I'm guessing that since your election to this House in 2006, you had a trust agreement with this fisherman. You had to have something with him. What is more interesting is the reason for the substitute operator is for, and I quote, sick time. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is, why did you mislead DFO on the reason for designating another fisherman to run your boat, the disconnection, for being sick? You were elected to this House at that same time. Were you sick, or were you sick because you're an NDP?
It's on the form.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. To the member opposite, I don't choose the words that the Honourable Member has chosen. I understand the DFO policy. I have followed DFO policy to the letter, and I'll be respectfully here representing the fishermen in my industry. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. My question is for the Minister of Fisheries. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Fisheries said he sought advice from the Office of the Conflict of Interest Commissioner because he was selling his fishing gear and license. Mr. Speaker, he is advised to assign all decision-making in the matter to someone in his department. So, Mr. Speaker, my question for the Minister of Fisheries is, who in your department was assigned that job?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for bringing the question forward. I encourage him to bring a lot more questions forward regarding the fisheries. I want to table a letter from the Commissioner of Conflict of Interest, Mr. Speaker. I took on this office on June the 19th. On the very first working day, following that appointment, I contacted the Commissioner of Conflict of Interest, and I asked for advice how to follow the process. I have been in business for 38 years as a fisherman. I have followed due process, and I'd like to table this, Mr. Speaker, and I look forward to the remaining questions.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, let me try again, because I understand this must have been a very delicate matter for the department and the minister. Someone had to handle the matter with great care. There was hundreds of thousands of taxpayers' dollars at stake, and to boot, the owner of the boat and the license would be your boss. So my question to the minister is, Mr. Speaker, how did the minister instruct his department to handle this file, and who handled the file?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As the member opposite is well aware, there is a branch within the provincial fisheries. It's called the Provincial Loan Board. I followed instructions by Mr. Nunn, and that particular loan board acts independent. There are 6 members, and they do their work thoroughly. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Conflict of Interest Commissioner, Justice Nunn, told the minister to appoint someone in his department to handle this whole matter. I'm just looking to see who it was. Let me review, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Fisheries sells his license and gear. He's responsible for the Fisheries Loan Board. The person buying the gear and the license is getting the money from the loan board, and the whole file is being monitored by a staff member at the minister's office. Mr. Speaker, my question for the minister: how can you expect any reasonable person in this province to believe that in your position, directly or indirectly, that you had no bearing on the outcome of this matter?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to give the member opposite a brief history of what I did. In 2008, a year before the June 9th election, I entered an agreement with a marine brokerage firm. I put my enterprise up for sale with certain conditions on that. I was very successful, and I want to just repeat, our party was very successful on June the 9th, 2009. I have followed due process, Mr. Speaker. I have contacted the Commissioner of Conflict of Interest, and I plan to do the appropriate things, and here we are. So I've answered all the questions, and I'm here to do the right thing on behalf of the people of Nova Scotia. Thank you very much.
The honourable member from Glace Bay on a new question.
Mr. Speaker, my question is again for the Minister of Fisheries. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Minister of Fisheries refused to tell Nova Scotians how much the minister pocketed for his license and gear, calling that figure private, his own private business. Mr. Speaker, in fact, the money that he received is not private. It's public money. It's taxpayers' dollars. So my question for the minister is, will the minister tell the House today how much taxpayers have forked out to buy his lobster license and boat?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think the question needs to be is who is purchasing this particular enterprise. The application was in that individual's name, not in the minister's name. And I like to be very clear. I worked all my life, 38 years, in the fishing industry. I paid every bill, and there's nothing outstanding on that. I've followed due process. I've contacted the Conflict of Interest Commissioner, and I intend to do the appropriate things. Thank you very much.
The honourable member from Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
You tell the minister, Mr. Speaker, he's not the only hard-working fisher person in this province. Let me tell you. Mr. Speaker, the minister had a choice. If he wanted to keep the sale of his boat and license private, he should have told the purchaser to go to a bank. When you accept money from the Nova Scotia Fisheries Loan Board, your right to privacy no longer exists, Mr. Speaker. Taxpayers have a right to know where their money is being spent. So my question for the minister is, will the minister immediately table the minutes from the September 4th meeting of the Loan Board when the money to purchase his license and boat was approved?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll advise my staff if I can get a copy of them particular minutes, and I would have no trouble tabling. I also just want to point out that we have followed due process. And also in the letter, the Commissioner of the Conflict of Interest, there was a statement in there that's saying once you become a Minister of the Crown, you must distance yourself from that particular business. And that's exactly what I did, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the minister said he was refusing to the media, refused to release the price of the boat, the purchase price of the boat. Now he's saying he'll table minutes of that meeting. Mr. Speaker, the price of a fishing license and boat in District 34 ranges from $500,000 to $1 million. Well, Mr. Speaker, my next question is for the Premier. This Premier campaigned, this Premier sat on opposition side for 10 years and said, you had to be open. You had to be transparent in this House. Well, the official opposition will do it for you, Mr. Premier. We'll table the minutes of that meeting. We'll table them right now. And the minutes will show that the Minister of Fisheries has been paid $567,000. $567,000 taxpayers' dollars for his fishing boat and fishing license, Mr. Speaker. Let me ask the Premier, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Premier, Mr. Openness, Mr. Transparency, how do you feel about that?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I feel somebody got a good deal. Whoever purchased that boat, for $500,000.
Order, please. The Honourable Premier.
What the presumption that the member makes is wrong. He doesn't know what he would have got for the boat because, of course, the guy who made the application was seeking financing. The purchase and sale agreement could have been for some number completely different. So, Mr. Speaker, no, you're talking about the private file of an individual in this province that is protected by the application that is made by a private citizen to a government to the government department is private information protected by the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act. That's the first thing. The second thing, Mr. Speaker, is what the Minister of Fisheries did is he applied to the Commissioner for advice. He wrote him, laid out the situation, received advice, and he followed it.
The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question today through you is to the Minister responsible for the Loan Board. The veil of secrecy is now turning into an iron curtain. Yep. During the election, the candidate who is now Minister of Fish, in his propaganda, and I have it here today, and I quote, one of Sterling's top priorities when he was first elected was the fight for a program that would allow Nova Scotia fishermen the opportunity to apply for loans to help secure commercial fishing licenses. His long-fought struggle finally ended when the loan was implemented on April 1st, 2009. And I'll table that. A program that was presented by the PCs and, of course, voted against by that member and the NDP party. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister, when you spoke to the residents of Shelburne County, did you inform them that you would be a beneficiary of this program, or did it just happen to slip your mind?
Yeah.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the member opposite, he suggested that I vote against the budget. I didn't vote against the budget. I voted against an incompetent party. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Argyll on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Of course, through all this, we heard there was actually an outstanding balance on that boat from approximately $300,000. But of course, that's a different story altogether. The Ministerial Code of Conduct states in Section 3E, and it goes like this. In any decision-making process where the minister knows or ought to reasonably know that there is an opportunity to further the minister's private interest or to improperly seek to further another person's private interest, the minister shall withdraw from the decision-making process. Mr. Speaker, can you provide me with documents immediately to prove that you withdrew from this decision-making process?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much. Again, Mr. Speaker, I tabled the letter earlier, and I took advice from the Commissioner of Conflict of Interest. I followed that advice. I did not get involved with any decision. I put the sale of that particular boat in the hands of a brokerage firm, and I can go into great lengths about the Loan Board. The Loan Board was established in 1938 through an act through Parliament. And I can show documents back in the mid-'80s where young fishermen wanted to have access to capital. And that has been a long while getting forward, and I hope that I played some part in that. And I can tell the members opposite, all parties, all people here, it is crucial. If we want to maintain independent fishermen in our coastal communities, they need to have access to capital. It is a good story. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Argyll on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, what we're trying to get at, in 1980, the then Minister of Fisheries, who was the Honourable Donnie Cameron, resigned from his position as Minister of Fisheries because of his selling his family farm, and because of the implications or what he felt might be a perceived conflict, that he resigned his position because the monies would be flowed through the Farm Loan Board at the time. And I'll table a number of documents and press releases of that time. So, Minister, he took himself out of that process, so there would be no perceived conflict. Mr. Speaker, my final supplementary to the Premier. When you decided on your cabinet, did you take into consideration that the member for Shelburne had a trust agreement, outstanding balance on the loan board, numerous licenses in his name, like a lobster license, like a mussel lease, which he still holds, the marine plant license, and Mr. Speaker, I could go on. My question, did the member disclose to you the intricate fishing enterprise that he continues to manage, while he is still Minister of Fisheries?
Resign.
The Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of the Minister of Fisheries acted entirely appropriately. He outlined the position for the Commissioner of Conflict of Interest. He received advice. He followed it. That's exactly what he should do, and I think he should be congratulated for his service and for the work that he's doing.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia fishermen are trying to figure out how it is that the current Minister of Fisheries has been able to hold on to his lobster licence after his election in 2006 up to the present. Mr. Speaker, the document tabled by the member from Argyll makes it clear that under DFO rules you have two options. You can have a trust agreement where you put your licence in someone else's name with a legal agreement to go with it, or you can apply to Department of Fisheries and Oceans for a medical certificate stating that you are too sick to fish your licence and therefore asking the department to designate an operator to fish your licence because you are too ill to do so yourself. The document tabled by the member from Argyll makes it clear that in this case the current Minister of Fisheries in 2006 said he was too sick to fish his own licence and therefore designate another operator. So my question to the Minister of Fisheries, is it your statement today to Nova Scotians that you have been too sick since 2006 to fish your own lobster licence?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, I think I understand the policies again, and it's left to some of the interpretation of the opposite side. I understand the DFO.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I understand the DFO policies very well. I have followed DFO's policies in the past, and I continue. I have great respect for them. I appreciate them, and I follow due process. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this comes down again to transparency, integrity, accountability, all of the above for this government and for these ministers. The minister has clearly stated he didn't have a trust agreement, so we can accept there was no trust agreement. That leaves it to the document provided by the member from Argyll, which says that he went to DFO, said he was too sick to be able to operate his boat, and someone else was designated as the operator. So I ask the minister again, is it your statement to Nova Scotians and to this House that you were too sick since 2006 to fish your own lobster licence?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My statement to the members of Nova Scotia or the residents of Nova Scotia is I follow DFO policies. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I guess there's no doubt to Nova Scotians just what kind of a new government that they have today and how different this government has been from previous governments in Nova Scotia about openness, transparency, and accountability. The question has been very simple to this Minister of Fisheries, yet he continues to avoid it and instead says that he's followed DFO regulations. DFO regulations allow a fisherman who is ill to have another operator operate their vessel for them. It's been done before. It is a legitimate rule. The question is very simple. Did the Minister of Fisheries, is it a statement that he was too ill since 2006 to operate his own lobster license? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Again, I want to repeat, I can go into great lengths that I have followed due process since I've been here. I understand the policies that reflects DFO regarding the fishing operations, and I have followed them. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the Minister of Economic and Rural Development. We are wondering if the Minister has read the Ministerial Code of Conduct, and do you know exactly the ministerial responsibilities that you have toward the regional development authorities across Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want all members of the House to know that I take the ministerial code very seriously, and I took the oath under the guidance of God, and I respect that.
The honourable member for Yarmouth on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, through you again to the Minister, and in case the Minister hasn't read the Regional Community Development Act, I will table that, and I've highlighted the areas maybe he should brush up on. Whereas the Minister has met with a private citizen at his private residence at a secret meeting that has a pending lawsuit against the Regional Development Authority of Southwest Nova, and the Minister of Fisheries accompanied him to this meeting, and they got caught at the meeting. But, Mr. Speaker, the Minister has yet failed to meet with the RDAs of this province or the associations of RDAs. My question to the Minister today is if the board of the Southwest Shore Development Authority drives to Halifax, will he meet him here in this House of Assembly, Mr. Speaker? Because he will not drive to Southwest Nova.
The Honourable Minister of Rural and Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And first, I think for clarification, I've never attended a secret meeting in my life, except Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I was in Shelburne for a couple of days. When I was in Shelburne, I met with a number of people in Shelburne, and Mr. Speaker, if you will indulge me, I will tell you who I met with. I met with the union of the laid-off employees of the Shelburne shipyard. I met with the employees that were laid off. I met with some members of their family. I met, Mr. Speaker, with residents of the community of Shelburne. Mr. Speaker.
We will allow the minister to answer the question, please.
Mr. Speaker, I also know for a fact that there is indeed a meeting planned for me with members of the Regional Authorities Association.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. The honourable member for Yarmouth on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it's so nice to know we have an open and transparent government. Mr. Speaker, my final supplement is through you to the Premier. I am tabling a letter that you would not do, Mr. Premier. It is a letter to the Conflict of Interest Commissioner outlining the concerns of the people of Southwest Nova that you would not do. Mr. Speaker, this Premier is turning his back on the people of Southwest Nova, and his minister is in blatant conflict, Mr. Speaker. And I also will table, Mr. Speaker, for the Premier's the Ministerial Code of Conduct, and asking him maybe if he would read Section 2 and 3F and report back to this House if his ministers are in breach of that Code of Conduct.
The Premier.
Thank you. First of all, Mr. Speaker, I have read the Code of Conduct closely, and they are not in any conflict. Secondly, I should let the member for Yarmouth know that the head of the Regional Development Agency was in my office not a week ago, talking to me about important issues in Yarmouth.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Fisheries. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Fisheries knew that he couldn't keep his license and boat and carry on that business while he was a Minister of the Crown. And Mr. Speaker, he did make that clear in a letter to the Conflict of Interest Commissioner, a June 22nd letter. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is, was he aware he could not remain a director of a company while a Minister of the Crown?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I was aware of the rules that once you become a Minister of the Crown, that you have to distance yourself from the whatever business, and I did that, Mr. Speaker, and I went through that process. I followed due process. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Code of Conduct is clear. A minister cannot hold a directorship of a company while a Minister of the Crown. Section 6A of the Ministerial Code of Conduct. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is, why is the Minister listed as a Director of Mr. Mussels Sea Farms Limited?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, through you to the honourable member opposite, the company that you're talking about, I was the president of it. I'm going through that due process. I have a number of assets.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have a number of assets that's in that company. We are going through a process. I contacted a brokerage firm to deal with the enterprise. I've done that. I had a truck, a half-ton truck. I'm in the process. That truck has been traded. I have a new vehicle. It's in a different name. We are in the process of disposing of the assets of that company. I am following due process. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister might want to talk to the Premier. He can get you a great deal for that truck, too, while he's at it. Mr. Speaker, if you looked at the ship's registry for the Minister's boat disconnection at 11:58 a.m. yesterday, just before question period, you would have seen Mr. Mussels Sea Farms listed as the owner of that vessel. If you look at the registry at the end of question period, magically, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Mussels Sea Farms had been replaced with another owner. Mr. Speaker, all of this between the beginning and the end of question period after we asked the Minister about the sale of his boat. Mr. Speaker, is anybody really buying this? The Minister of Fisheries makes Ernie Fage look like an amateur, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question for the Minister is, what exactly do you have to hide?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the member opposite, I have all the intentions to make everybody in Nova Scotia very aware of the opportunities that we are facing in our fishing industry. I respect to bring that very forceful, that message up to Ottawa. And I'd like to take the opportunity here. I have followed process here, Mr. Speaker. I've talked about it. I have addressed the members opposite, and I intend to do. And I look forward to having some other questions regarding the fishing industry, and I look forward to having some other questions regarding that. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is for the Minister of Economic and Rural Development. My question, Mr. Minister, does your department value the positive effects that the development of literacy and community infrastructure has in rural Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the short answer to the question is yes, we do.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes on his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm certainly glad to hear that because the Antigonish Library is currently having a difficult time securing the provincial portion of funding they need from this NDP government to move forward on an important initiative for the region. The People's Place Project. The People's Place Project has secured $3.45 million in funding, including $250,000 that was raised by the community. My question, Mr. Speaker, through you to the Minister, will the Minister commit the People's Place Project for the remaining $1.8 million that is required?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And first I want to say is that I personally, and certainly my department, think that the People's Place Project in Antigonish is a fantastic initiative. Further, Mr. Speaker, I had the pleasure of meeting with representatives from Antigonish about a month ago in my office, along along with another minister of government. At that time, Mr. Speaker, it's quite difficult for me to talk when so many other people are talking around the House. Mr. Speaker, one of the things is that the People's Place did apply for funding through ERA. What I did, and in a letter to the requesters, I said, well, maybe it just doesn't fit under the criteria of the ERD, Economic and Rural Development, but I will personally, with the assistance of other people within my government, see what we can do with respect to People's Place. So we are working on it.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'll table a letter that the minister sent to Mr. Eric Stackhouse, Chief Librarian for the Pictou-Antigonish Regional Library, dated August 24th. In the letter, the minister refuses to fund the project that has received funding from the federal and municipal levels of government. This government states that it's living within its means, yet it seems to be ignoring key investments in the future of Nova Scotia communities. Mr. Speaker, my question for the minister: why have a division of community and rural development if worthwhile projects like the one in Antigonish are dismissed when they're asking for 1/3 investment in the project, when the other levels of government are on board?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't know how much clearer I can make this. Is that they applied for funding under Economic and Rural Development. I admit it, and I said, and I will reiterate, I sent them a letter saying that under the ERD guidelines, it does not fit our criteria. However, I have taken on the personal responsibility within government to find if there's any other way that we can assist People's Place project.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, the document tabled by the member from Argyll is a standard renewal which is issued by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans when it comes to fishing licenses. Mr. Speaker, the renewal here refers to licenses which are held, and I know I can't say his name, but it is the name of the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture, and it goes on to list what those licenses are. But at the very end of this renewal, it talks about substitute operators. And with that, it refers to the fishery identification number of the license. It talks about the operator name, who is the substitute. It has a start date of September 8, 2008, end date of September 8, 2009. And the reason, it says, is sick time. The Minister of Fisheries has made it clear he's very familiar with DFO regulations and he understands them very clearly. So I'm wondering if he would be so kind to explain to the members of this House, under DFO regulations, what does sick time mean?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I understand the policy very well, and I have met the policy regarding the substitute operator for a fishing vessel. I have done that, and I respect DFO's policies, and I have done that. I agreed to them. Thank you.
The honourable member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
You know, Mr. Speaker, fishermen throughout Nova Scotia are finding this quite amusing, that while some have been refused loans through the Fisheries Loan Board, the individual buying the license from the Minister of Fisheries somehow had his loan approved. Now we know that the Minister of Fisheries has managed to hold on to his lobster license for over 3 years without actually operating it himself, all along while standing in this House and waxing eloquently about the owner-operator principle and how the NDP party supported it. And now he keeps telling us that he's followed DFO regulations. So once again, Mr. Speaker, You know, we're just lowly provincial officials here. We're not up in Ottawa. We don't know, apparently, what the DFO regulations are. Since the minister is so familiar with them, I ask him again, on this piece of paper with your license renewal, what, minister, do DFO regulations mean when they refer to sick time as the reason why you did not operate your own license?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, but the members offered seem to have more information on me than I had myself. The point, Mr. Speaker, there is a very complex web of policies that DFO requests regarding owner-operator. I have met them policies. DFO is very familiar with my position over the last 3 years, and I can assure the members that I have met them particular requirements. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
You know, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Fisheries has said he's got 38 years' experience. If I'm not mistaken, yesterday in the press, I believe he even went so far as to say that he was the best individual in Nova Scotia to hold the post of Minister of Fisheries. I'm sure that would be cold comfort for the fishermen throughout Nova Scotia that are scratching their heads right now trying to figure out exactly how the Minister of Fisheries could accept a $500,000 loan for his licensing gear from his own department and yet somehow tell Nova Scotians there's no conflict of interest or any appearance of a conflict of interest. Now we're simply asking him to explain how he held on to a license, which other fishermen cannot do unless they are legitimately sick and they produce the necessary doctor's papers to show they are too ill to operate their vessel. So being the minister won't explain what sick time means, now that he's Minister of Fisheries, will you be open and transparent and table in this House the documents you provided to Fisheries and Oceans for them to justify you having a substitute operator because of sick time?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to clarify one of the statements of the member opposite. It just I did not request the loan. That was from another individual. I put the boat for sale for a marine brokerage system. I have followed due process. I have contacted the Commissioner of Conflict of Interest. I have followed DFO policy. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, teachers at Nova Scotia Community Colleges graduate hundreds of students each year. The work these individuals do is vital to the economy of Nova Scotia, whether it be in the trades, service sector, health, childcare, business, or etc. My question, Mr. Speaker, is the Premier. Will he step in today at the 11th hour and treat these Nova Scotia Community College teachers as equals in the education system by resolving that dispute today?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can advise the member opposite that I have no intention of stepping into what is the middle of a collective bargaining situation. I think it should be resolved at the table. I would hope that the representatives of the community college staff would go back to the table and negotiate with the community college as is appropriate in the circumstances.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland South on your first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, to the Premier. Certainly a different song than the Honourable Premier sang when he's on this side of the House in different disputes in the past. Mr. Speaker, our Nova Scotia Community College regularly turns out qualified individuals to fill much-needed vacancies, as the Premier knows, across this province. By not settling this dispute now, Mr. Speaker, the Premier and his Minister are delaying the opening, for example, of long-term care beds and placement of individuals in those, while also failing to fill trades where positions are much needed right across this province. Mr. Speaker, will the Premier do the right thing, act now to end this dispute so the availability of trained professionals in Nova Scotia is not jeopardized?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I will not do what the member opposite is asking. I will not impose a contract. I will not set aside agreements. I will not entertain the idea of back-to-work legislation. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to do that because that's the way they operated. We respect collective bargaining.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland South on your final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The message we're getting, the calls we're getting is that the former government treated these people with respect. With respect, like all teachers across this province deserve, whether they work in the public system or whether they work for the Nova Scotia Community College. And these teachers are not receiving that respect, Mr. Speaker. Many of these students who are attending have put their lives on hold. Their families have their lives on hold. They've taken a financial risk here. Mr. Speaker, I'm asking the Premier today on behalf of these teachers and the students to show true leadership. And we involve himself in the process and end this today so that the students and the teachers can get on with their lives.
The Honourable the Premier.
Pardon me. Again, Mr. Speaker, I will not interfere in the collective bargaining process. I will respect it.
The Honourable the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations. Mr. Speaker, almost 1 year ago today, the government of the day announced that Nova Scotians heating their homes with oil, natural gas or propane would receive up to $450 rebate under the Heating Assistance Rebate Program, formerly known as Keep the Heat. However, Mr. Speaker, my office has recently heard that the government is making changes to this program. So my question for the Minister is, what changes is your government making to the HARP program, and when can we expect the notification of these changes?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I can't speak on that because this is a budget item. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it's a Keep the Heat program that was already in place, and she can't speak on it, Mr. Speaker, but her department can. Mr. Speaker, I received correspondence from a concerned Nova Scotian who contacted Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations by email, and this was the response they received. Thank you for your email inquiry on October 6, 2009 regarding the Heating Assistance Rebate Program. The Heating Assistance Rebate Program will be going ahead this year. However, the amount has changed to a maximum of $200. There has been no start date announced, and the applications will be available once the program starts. So my question to the Minister is, why is your government reducing the maximum amount related to this rebate from $450 to $200 for Nova Scotians who require it to heat their homes this winter?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was my understanding that I had to wait until I did my estimates to explain that program, but I'm willing to do that now if that's appropriate. Yes, we have, the program is in place, but there has been changes. There has been some changes because the economy has changed. The cost of fuel has gone down, and from the time period that it was brought in, we've also initiated, as of October 1st, the provincial portion of HST has gone off electricity. What is being done with this program, although the member opposite might have a perception that we are lowering the amount going out, what we've done is broadened it so more people in Nova Scotia will be able to get the rebate.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have any perception that they're lowering the amount. Her own staff